Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Dickinson. I thank you all for watching. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Philosophy Clips. In this philosophy clip, I will be discussing Don Marquis's classic 1989 essay, Why Abortion is Immoral. Now this will be a two-part video series on the Marquis paper. Here in part one, I'll do the stage setting for the argument, and then in part two, I'll turn my attention to Marquis's anti-abortion argument. So let's go ahead and get to the stage setting here in part one of this video series. So let's look at the title real quick. So we know that the argument is going to be one that establishes a restrictivist conclusion or a pro-life conclusion. Why abortion is immoral is the title. So he'll be developing a restrictivist position. But keep in mind that it's going to be a qualified restrictivism. It's going to be a moderate restrictivism because he doesn't think that it's always impermissible for a female to have an abortion. Just generally speaking is, and if a female is going to have an abortion, the considerations or the reasons on offer have to be really good ones. So that's one thing to note, just thinking about the title of the paper. Another thing to note about the title of the paper, is the fact that he uses the term immoral there. That tells you that he's focusing on the morality as opposed to the legality of the issue. So Marquis is going to develop a moderate restrictivist view. He's focusing on the morality of the view and setting aside the legal issues. Now, if you have in your mind that what Marquis is doing is basically using his reasoning or using philosophical arguments to establish religious conclusions, you should get that out of your mind, because Marquis, he has said this several times, at least that I've seen him. He said that he doesn't have a religious bone in his body, so he is proceeding on purely secular grounds. So he has a moderate secular restrictivist view, or a moderate secular pro-life view that he works out in this paper. What this means, what the secular bit means, is that there is not a single religious premise at all in his argument. I think that it might be useful to think about Marquis as having a restrictivist conclusion and recognizing that that many might think that his restrictivist conclusion is based on religious ideas or religious arguments. Marquis is at pains in his paper and elsewhere to try to distance himself from those who arrive at restrictivist conclusions through the use of religious reasoning or religious premises. So sometimes those views are called, those religious arguments for the restrictivist position, they're called sanctity of human life positions. So sanctity of human life theories are broader theories that get worked out by some philosophers. And these philosophers will then, from big picture theoretical reasons having to do with the sacredness of human beings, will end up arriving at the restrictivist or the pro-life conclusion. Marquis arrives at a very similar conclusion, if not the same conclusion in some cases, as his sanctity of human life counterpart, but he does so using purely secular reasons. So I think this is why in the Marquis he takes pains to say certain things that you may not recognize when you're first reading it, to, as it were, distance himself from those who come at the issue from a religious vantage point. It's going to turn out that on Marquis's view, he thinks that there are big picture theoretical considerations that favor restrictivism, that have nothing to do with anything religious. Again, he claims not to have a religious bone in his body. So in this way also, Marquis, he'll be thinking about the abortion issue, the morality issue related to abortion in a big picture way. There are strong, he thinks, theoretical reasons for accepting the restrictivist position. In this way, his style of argumentation is different from, say, Judith Jarvis Thomson, who thinks about things first by thinking about cases, right? She gives us these thought experiments which generate powerful arguments for her view. Marquis is like, gosh, here's a big picture theory, and out of it comes a restrictivist view. So we'll see how that works out, and this is all stage setting at this point. So when Marquis began thinking about the abortion issue and how his big picture theoretical considerations led him to this restrictivist view, he recognized that the abortion debate seemed to be in a kind of stalemate, and it needed to be, as it were, broken up. The stalemate needed to be broken. And so let me see if I can explain what the stalemate is, and then that'll allow us to segue into the big picture considerations that I keep alluding to that Marquis developed that establishes his restrictivist view. So the stalemate is basically this. You have the pro-lifers on the one hand, the restrictivists on the one hand, and many of them, he claims, are coming at the issue based on premises involving human sacredness, or all human life being sacred, and human life being sacred implies that human life is such that it has the right to life. So sacredness implies the right to life, or the human sacredness implies that all humans have the right to life, and if a being has a right to life, then whether or not it's a person, guess what? It's wrong to kill. Just generally speaking. So maybe not every single case, but still, what Marquis wants to argue is that these pro-life arguments, the sanctity of human life, pro-life arguments, restrictivist arguments, they end up proving too much, as it were. They end up being too inclusive, if I can put it that way. Why? Because we don't think that all life is sacred. So he gives the example of human cancer cells. Well, we try to destroy human cancer cells, and we think it's okay that we do so. Those are human lives, in some sense of human lives. So it looks like on the pro-life arguments run by those who would claim that all human life is sacred, right? Looks like they're going to be committed to it being wrong to destroy human cancer cells, but that's the wrong result. So that's a problem for those views. Now, on the other side of things, the pro-choice side of things, or the permissivist view, the standard line of arguments there have us think about personhood, and the claim is that, well, only persons have the right to life, and where persons is this really robust idea. A person is like a being that has advanced enough levels of rationality, can act for reasons, etc., etc. So only persons have the right to life, but fetuses, given they don't have these robust psychological properties, they're not persons, so then they would lack the right to life, and it wouldn't be then impermissible to abort them. What Marquis wants to say is that there's something wrong with this line of reasoning, because it seems like it doesn't get things just right, because it would seem then that according to this argument, it'd be permissible all on its own to kill infants and toddlers because they're not persons, or at the very least, it denies the right to life to infants and toddlers and the severely mentally disabled, etc., etc. So there seems to be a shortcoming in the premise that only persons have the right to life. That goes against what we ordinarily think. Now keep in mind, persons there is being used in this technical sense to mean something like, again, the having of robust psychological properties, which obviously fetuses, infants, toddlers perhaps, severely mentally disabled, they're going to lack. So it looks like what Marquis is saying is like there's a stalemate here. The pro-life side ends up proving too much, and then the pro-choice side ends up denying the right to life to those among us who we think have the right to life, and both then are struggling. So Marquis says what we need to do is take a step back and think about what makes it wrong to kill. So the big picture, theoretical stuff that I keep alluding to is thinking about, just very generally, what makes it wrong to kill someone. And so we're thinking about a theory of the wrongness of killing. So if you're doing an ethical theory, this is a perfectly fine thing to try to work out. Okay, what makes it wrong to kill someone? And so Marquis, he thought about this. And he said, well, the easiest cases to think about are cases of like you and I. What would make it wrong for someone, for example, to walk into my office right here and kill me, all things being equal? And then ask whether or not the theory we arrive at applies to, guess what? Fetuses. So that's the big picture. That's the big picture move that's going to be made. So what makes it wrong to kill me? Let's begin there. What makes it wrong to kill you? Or what would make it wrong to kill you? What would make it wrong to kill me? So I'll use myself as my example. You can use yourself as your own if you like. So what would make it wrong to kill me? Well, one theory out there is that those who do the killing, those who do the murdering, they are brutalized. They're made more vicious. That doesn't seem to be like the best view, right? Because it seems like what we want in account of the wrongness of killing, and if supposing I'm the one who's killed, we want to explain like why it is that I'm the primary victim, not the person who killed me, which is what the brutalization view would say. Moreover, what is it that would brutalize? What is it that would make a killer more vicious by killing me? Isn't it the fact that that individual has done something wrong in the first place? Okay, so there's some big issues with the brutalization view. Now, it may turn out that part of a general theory, the wrongness of killing, is going to have it that, part of what makes killing someone wrong is a person who kills someone is made more vicious, is made worse. But that individual, in 99.9% of the cases, isn't the primary victim. Right? It's the person who's been killed. And so that's what's wrong with that view. At least one of the things that's wrong with that view. Okay. Another kind of view out there would be that what makes it wrong to kill me would be the fact that my loved ones would grieve my loss. Yeah, I mean, it's maybe hard to believe, but I do have some loved ones. They would grieve my loss, and they would suffer because of it. Well, again, this view is going to suffer, isn't it? It's going to suffer for one of the reasons that the brutalization view suffered, right? Because the primary victims, according to this loved ones view, is going to be that my loved ones are the primary victims. But again, in account of the wrongness of killing, I've got to be the primary victim. I'm the one who was killed after all. Again, in a complete account of the wrongness of killing, the fact that my loved ones are going to grieve my loss, that's going to be part of the overall theory. But I have to be the primary victim. But there's also another problem, isn't there? Suppose I didn't have any loved ones. Maybe that's easy to imagine. Suppose I'm like a philosophical hermit and I have no loved ones. All my family members have died, or just no one loves me, right? No one would suffer if I were killed. It looks like it's not wrong to kill me on that view. Okay, so we need a better view. And I like to go through these views that Marquis discusses because they help us really see what we want, big picture from a theory of the wrongness of killing. And what we want is that if I'm killed, the primary victim, not my loved ones, not the murderer, of course. Okay, so what about the following view? What makes it wrong to kill me is going to be the fact that you've deprived me, or the killer's deprived me, let's not say you. The killer, the murderers deprived me of the future that I would have had, the valuable future that I would have had. The murder deprives me of the goodness that I would have had in my future were I not to have been killed. And here's Marquis. That sounds awfully intuitive, doesn't it? Certainly better than the first two views, but this one seems to be one that in this kind of theory, this deprivation theory, seems to be one that we would invoke very naturally, wouldn't we? And wouldn't we say if I were killed, gosh, he had so much life to live. He had so much goodness to enjoy. Right? He had his family to live with and enjoy. He had his friends. He had his philosophical pursuits. He had his YouTube channel to continue working on. He had his podcast that he was writing episodes for. All those good things that he was deprived of. So on Marquis's view, this deprivation view seems like it's intuitive, it's natural, it's one that we would often invoke just in ordinary circumstances. So he wants to say that this deprivation theory is the correct one, or it's at least one of the correct ones. So he wants to say this is the big picture, this is the general theory that accounts for the wrongness of killing across a wide range of cases without having to be the case that it's going to account for the wrongness of killing in every case. So he means his view to be really establishing a sufficient condition on the wrongness of killing. Okay, so I've been wrongfully killed if I've been deprived of the valuable future that I would have had were I not to have been killed. So the if there is really important. Okay, I'm wrongfully killed if, not only if I'm deprived of a valuable future the valuable future that I would have had, okay, were I not to have been killed. So Marquis calls this a deprivation theory of the wrongness of killing. Again, the deprivation theory of the wrongness of killing, DTWK for short. DTWK, the deprivation theory of the wrongness of killing. And he takes this to provide us with a very sufficient condition for what makes it wrong to kill someone, a normal human adult like you and I. Okay, that's supposed to be the easy case, because of course it'd be wrong to kill you or I. Okay, all things being equal. Okay. So he's not making a claim, again, that every single case this is going to be the theory that accounts for the wrongness of killing. Just very generally speaking, is going to be that one. That is to say, there could be other conditions, because we can imagine cases, couldn't we, where someone doesn't have a valuable future ahead of them. Marquis certainly doesn't want it to be the case, then it's permissible to kill them. There are going to be some other considerations. So it's perfectly compatible with DTWK that there be other theories that play a role in accounting for the wrongness of killing. Okay, so hopefully you see the significance of maintaining that this is providing a sufficient condition for the wrongness of killing. Okay. So now from here, we have DTWK. It explains in very intuitive general terms why it's wrong to kill a normal human adult. Okay, like you or I. Okay, but now here's the question. Does this theory also apply to fetuses? The very, very tiny among us in the wombs of females. And what Marquis wants to say is, yeah, of course it does, because they'd have valuable futures just like we do. Of course, they're at an earlier stage of their development. But the earlier stage of development is not a moral difference. They're still going to have, all things being equal, valuable futures. So we see how Marquis, he develops DTWK as a general theory that accounts for the wrongness of killing. It applies to you or I. That's the easy case. But then it also applies to fetuses. And that's how he arrives at his restrictivist conclusion. Okay, again, it's a moderate restrictivist argument, view, I should say. It doesn't rely on a single religious premise. All the premises there, I've laid them out for you. And I'll do some more in the next part. Okay? They involve thinking about very general considerations about the wrongness of killing, and they're applying them to fetuses. There's no claim about sacredness. There are just claims about whether or not you're such that killing you would involve depriving you of a valuable future. Okay, where the valuable future needs to get understood. But I'll set that aside to talk about that in part 2. So the stage has been set for understanding Marquis's moderate secular restrictivist position. That concludes part 1. If you have any questions about anything that I've said here, please comment below, let me know. Be on the lookout for part 2, where I'll dive into more detail on Marquis's argument. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching, everybody.